probably the most complicated example on whether to take something or not to take. We can see already like that the black's king on h8 is not in the best shape. Here white played rook dg1, and the question is, can we take on c4? Can we not? What are the alternatives? And as a kind of general note or general thing, when you don't have good alternatives, and anyway you are tactically already like close to be lost or under huge pressure, then there is no point to think long. I mean, especially when you don't have an attractive second move. And apart from queen takes c4, I would say there are not so many attractive second moves. You can consider something like rook takes h3, which definitely is, well, available. But even after capture on h3, the situation or the pressure along the g file or related to your king didn't improve. And then we can say that the pawn on c4 is much more important than the pawn on h3, at least when we speak about the structure. So that means, well, queen takes c4 becomes more and more obvious just as a kind of small thing. The computer, for example, apart from queen takes c4, suggests here a5, but this is not a human move. That's why I don't really want to discuss it. Just not that we are like here on the wrong page. a5 is objectively possible, but let's focus on queen takes c4. After queen takes c4, the first move which comes to our mind is obviously bishop takes h3. But the good thing about this move is a bishop takes h6. But the good thing about the move is that we have already an emergency solution with rook takes c3, which at least gives us the feeling we cannot lose. And this makes already in the decision process the move queen takes c4 a lot easier. Despite the fact that we know that we should always look for at least 3 candidate moves, or maybe 2. If one of them is winning, then it's fine if there are 2. That apart from rook takes c3, we should at least look if we have an alternative. After bishop takes h6, the bishop on g7 is hanging. Can we capture on h6? That's the first question. Well, the answer is no, because after the capture, knight h7, take, and rook g1, I would say black is not in the best shape of his life. So that's why this we can, with this we can actually skip. Apart from bishop takes h6, knight e8 would save the guy, but then we have a huge problem somewhere around the h file, probably just bishop takes g7 here, knight takes g7 doesn't work. There is a mate, and if rook takes g7, there's queen takes e8 as one way of winning the game, but probably the easiest one. In any case, so we can also dismiss bishop knight e8. So the question is, can we somehow protect our bishop in a different way? And the answer is yes, because here we have the chance to just move the bishop one move backwards. And now after bishop f8, we see with all these kind of red arrows the disaster which white had to face. Because now the problem is that my bishop attacks h6, my rook attacks the queen on g6, and there's no way for the white's queen to go somewhere without losing the bishop. Also, the f6 is well protected, and g8 is also well protected. And latest when we see bishop f8, we know that we win the game, and this move is a lot better than rook takes c3. But in general, from the psychological point, it helps when we have an emergency solution quite obvious already as a kind of reserve. So that means bishop takes h6 is not something we should be scared of, and now we should look for other candidate moves. And here, since we know the rules, checks, captures, moves with a threat, capture on h6 we have seen. Checks really don't work here, at least not in my opinion, because sacrificing the queen is not a good solution. That leaves moves with a threat. And here, not many moves with a threat, but the move rook g4, which is actually nice from this point of view, that the rook aims to go to h4, and then h6 is a problem. And if you take on g4, then rook and bishop attack h6, and it looks like that, well, black can resign here. Then we have a situation when we believe that everything is over. Then, of course, we can skip the process. We can decide we don't take on c4 and everything is done. But sometimes it's really worth to really check out every moves, no matter how stupid they look like. When we consider that rook takes h6 is the most dangerous threat, then we can already see that rook takes e3 don't help the issue because it's still a mate. Rook f4, same way, it's still a mate. So we should find a move which does not even allow rook takes h6. And apart from checks, captures we already like excluded, they don't work. There are not many options but to consider a kind of retarded looking move like rook h3. And only considering it is enough to basically tell you that this move works because of some tactical trick. Apart from rook h3, maybe queen f1 was another emergency solution, but with queen f1, you just check it because you should check it. It's a check and it distracts the rook. It might already give you the hint that rook h3 is here in this position available. And after rook h3, actually, we see that black is winning because if you take, we have the check, we capture on h3, we solve our problems, and we are an exchange up and nothing to worry. So last but not least, after queen takes c4, actually, according to the computer, the strongest move is queen f7, but this is also a super difficult move. I mean, the idea of queen c7 is just to say, okay, I lost the pawn, I give some pressure here. Maybe at some point I have some tricks with bishop h6 or rook takes g7, and I go out of the opposition. Here, for example, like after queen d3, well, according to the computer, it's equal. Anyway, queen f7 is a very, well, difficult move to see in a way, but as I said, just to complete the whole exercise, queen f7 would still lead to an unclear game. Nevertheless, the move queen takes c4 objectively is the move which has to be played. Of course, for those who are like super geniuses in a computer style, they would find the move a5. I'm not even sure what a5 does. Probably after you take it, I take on c4. That's the only reasonable idea I have behind the move. That's why it's not worth considering it, because it's anyway mainly about taking on c4 or not. But in general, like, the most difficult thing when you take a decision over the board is, well, to do it preferably quite quickly. And if you don't have alternatives, then there is no point to lose much time. If you see that rook takes h3 doesn't solve the issue and the pawn on c4 is much more attractive, that's already one thing. If you see that if you play any other move, you don't get anything, but you're still under pressure, that's another thing. So here, for example, like practically speaking, to take on c4 is quite strong. Of course, you should see what to do with bishop takes h6. You may easily miss rook g4. This can actually happen. So a lot of difficult tasks here to solve. But in general, when you have, for example, like moves in a game like rook fd1 and rook ad1, and there is absolutely no visible difference, there's no point to lose half an hour or something, then you just move, because time management is also part of the game, and it will definitely help you later on, because when you have difficult moments to solve, like for example in this position, it would be nice to have some remaining minutes on the clock.